continue developing theory along those lines, and religion could be regarded as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these things are they're contingent on many parameters. I mean, the reasons, if you ask at an individual level why they believe in religion, there is the catalogue of several factors. You know, it makes them feel good, the love of a father figure, being deemed high in the praises of a powerful being, and such like. There are a plethora of reasons why people personally believe.
And mistaken scientific ones, like they think you need it in order to explain the complexity of life.
Yes, the false positive.
Yeah.
But I can see how that can work for an individual, that if you had lots of individuals who were religious, or had funny beliefs, that's one thing. But you need, religions are almost always hierarchical, and they have many of the characteristics that I would associate with efficiency in fighting in groups. If you actually take a look at the way that soldiers are usually trained, you demonize the enemy, and this is a sort of necessary part in that eventually when combat comes you have to be able to kill these people. And you are now faced with a very difficult problem that most of the time you don't, you need a reason why you are my friend, but someone who is almost identical to you, your neighbour, is your enemy. And if you all look the same, you need a psychological mechanism that makes it okay to kill this person. Now this is usually done by demonizing the enemy. And even the very word demonize it has religious connotation.
Okay, well if you're going to turn that into an explanation for why religion exists, don't do it in a Darwinian way, do it in the following way. It's more like ecological succession. It's something like the world becomes filled with those cultures which have had conquering armies. The Roman Empire, the Islamic Empire. The reason why Islam is so widespread in, for example, the Indian subcontinent, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Arabia, in North Africa, etc., is conquest. And I mean, it's as simple as that. And or a slave trade would be another way in which it could happen. There are various historical forces which lead to this spread of ideas, and if you can say certain ideas lend themselves to conquering, then that is a good explanation for why those ideas are indeed widespread over the earth. Islam is widespread because of military conquest, and so that, and you could say that Islam contributed to military conquest by making people warlike, by making them believe in jihad, by making them believe that they'll go to a martyr's heaven. All those things could indeed help. Don't call it a Darwinian explanation, though.
Well, in part, I agree. And, I mean, I think this is always the problem with these psychologically evolution explanations, is you never have any, behaviours don't leave behind any real evidence. And what I think you're really interested in is that little genetic bottleneck when modern mankind emerged. What was it? What was the local environment like that formed the behaviours of those early humans? The modern effects of these is, if you like, if they were tribal groups that had to survive together and they needed strong social bonding, then the manifestation of the behaviour that came out of that bottleneck is, it's not going to be the same. There's a factor of scale here. In what works very well in a group of 70 or 100 people might, that same behaviour that produces that polarisation on a small scale will have a different effect if you put it in a society of 1 million.
I think it's very true that quite a lot of our truly Darwinian explanations work if you think back to a time when we lived in small tribal groups, and no longer work in the same way, no longer could be easily interpreted now that we live in large cities surrounded by millions of people. I mean, one major difference is that in our much of our evolutionary past, we would, as individuals, have been surrounded by other individuals whom we knew
Yes.
and very few strangers. Similarly, we'd have been surrounded by close kin. We'd have been surrounded by clan members, by cousins, by uncles and aunts and nephews and nieces. Now we're surrounded mostly by strangers. And so it's very plausible that we should make Darwinian explanations that are based in an environment where we lived in small tribal groups, groups of kin, groups of cousins, and groups of acquaintances who went on seeing each other for the whole of their lives. And under those conditions, you get different Darwinian pressures from under conditions of anonymity, living in large groups of millions where you don't see people over and over again. I think that's very true. And I've used that sort of explanation to account for altruism, to account for the widespread niceness that we have in humans, the tendency to give to charity, the tendency to want to give blood, to want to give to tsunami relief and things like that. That's not easily explained on a Darwinian basis. It is easily explained if you go back to a time when we lived in kin groups and groups of close acquaintances.
Yes. However, in times, people are usually only nice in times of plenty. In a stressed environment, I think there is spontaneously people form together into small groups.
That may well be, but we still need an explanation for why we're nice even in times of plenty. It's not an easy thing to explain on a Darwinian basis.
It is conceivable that there is a sort of plastic phenotype for behaviour here, that in a stressed environment you become more polarised. In a less stressed environment, you don't. Just like your facial hair goes faster when it's colder.
It's possible.
And so there may be some sort of behavioural feedback there. So, I guess for me, this is a key question in how you address the problem of religion. You first of all have to decide, is religion a bad thing? And if it's a bad thing, how is the best way to reduce the amount of religiosity in the world? And if it's got a significant genetic component, it's likely that you will have limited success in trying to reason people out of their religion. So there's this. I think it's actually an important point to actually work out whether it's an individual essentially getting false positives and a sort of element of paranoia about it, or is it actually is there more of a biological component to it than that? Obviously with all of these things there is a mix of environment and the genetics. But if there's a significant component from the genetics, it's likely that it will be tough to reason people out of their religion.
You might have said that about contraception. Obviously the biological function of copulation is reproduction.
Great.
So contraception is a thoroughly un-Darwinian practice, and yet it's something we have absolutely no difficulty whatever in embracing. Because what natural selection has built into us is sexual lust, not a lust for children. Lust for children may come later when the child arrives. But it's not difficult to emancipate. The human brain doesn't find it that difficult to emancipate itself from its genetic heritage. And there are many of us individuals, you and I are examples, where we have no difficulty at all in emancipating ourselves from whatever historical biological pressures there may have been towards religious belief. And it looks as though all it takes is a bit of education.